So, you've already seen it on Twitter. Clone High's eagerly anticipated reboot, unfortunately for the team,
nothing bad ever happens to the Kennedys!
appears to have leaked. For those who don't know but have seen all the fuss, Clone High originally ran from 2002 to 2003. It was voiced by many of the same main characters in the TV show Scrubs, was created by Bill Lawrence just as Scrubs was, and like Scrubs it was aggressively 2000s and that was the point. It was satirizing the cheesy drama archetypes of the day, and it nailed a lot of the tropes. So as you can imagine, many people who grew up in the 2000s feel really nostalgic for it, even if they didn't grow up watching Clone High specifically. There's something about its awkward humor, its blocky art style, it's just peak 2000s. This, but also just how genuinely entertaining the show is, had people clamoring for more of the titular clones from the day the last episode aired. There was no news for years, but the cult following Clone High had, and still has, remained hopeful. But finally, we have been blessed. It's coming, at long last, at some point in the first half of this year. After 20 years, we will get our first new episode of Clone High officially released. But someone's unwrapped their present early, and here we are, we've got a leak to analyse. So, what's new with Clone High then? Anything? Big spoiler alert here. If you haven't seen the leaked episode, go and watch it. Done it? Okay. Well, for a start, we've got a few new clones. There are a few new names on this roster at the beginning of the leaked episode that we haven't seen before. And there are a few new people appearing in Abe's, flip-flop comments box, but there are a few new designs too. Namely, Frida Kahlo, Harriet Tubman, Sacagawea, Confucius, and Christopher Columbus. If they wanted to introduce new characters to be classmates with most of our original cast, then the sheer amount of time that's passed since season 1 allows them to do that. The board of shadowy figures has had plenty of time to grow new clones and have them age up to 16, like the clones we're familiar with. And that's exactly what the show does. Scudworth even has a little diagram to show us. Now, I've heard some complaints about these new designs, which largely fall into two camps. They're too colourful to fit into the existing clone designs we have, and they don't resemble who they're cloned from. On the first count, yeah, I can kind of see that. I like the way they've done it with Confucius though. That does give off massive 2000s skater boy vibes, and I think that fits. Though this isn't set in the 90s/2000s anymore, and I'll get onto that. The bright colours, although they clash with the show's typical palette, suit Frida Kahlo the best I think, the original being an eccentric and very troubled artist. It works for her to have a weird, busy look. But although I was feeling a little meh on it when all I'd seen was the set of leaked stills, the whole point of this episode is that everything is new and weird to the OG clone kids. I actually like that they made the new clones wacky and hip in a very corporate 2000s way, 20 years on. Everything's changed, but nothing's changed. On the second count, with the new clones not resembling their originals, I initially agreed, but then I thought more about it. Look at the rest of the main characters. Abe kind of resembles Abe Lincoln, yeah. Joan, we really have no reason to think she looked anything like this. Cleopatra we have less of a clear reference for still. She's basically a walking hieroglyph, and that's what her design's about. You wouldn't know who JFK was a clone of until he opened up his mouth. At least I wouldn't have. Some of the side characters in season 1 look more like how we envisioned their originals than the main cast do, like Jesus, MLK Jr. or Caesar, and this is largely done for a gag, with characters who have very readily identifiable features. So I don't think it's an issue that the new clones, namely Harriet Tubman and Confucius, don't look like their originals. The art style also has a role to play in making them unrecognizable. I do think picking Harriet Tubman to clone was a bit of a mistake though. She's heard of, sure, she is famous, but most of the heavily featured clones are people who are either more well-known or people with unique physical features. Unique enough that you could draw them in this very blocky art style, and yeah, maybe they'd not be instantly recognized in all cases, but if you told someone this is meant to be person X, your response would be, oh, yeah, I see that. So maybe a different famous figure would have been a better choice for a clone you're presumably going to be using a lot. And why would you be introducing new clones if you didn't want to heavily use them, right? If you absolutely had to pick another woman to clone, you could go for Boudica, stick a bunch of crazy Celtic tattoos on her if you wanted, and play her as as a poser, or Aretha Franklin, Helen Keller, Audrey Hepburn, or if this was said a bit later, you could have some interesting figures. I think the rest are fine. They're all either physically recognizable enough or well known enough, even if their designs look little like the original people. On that note, new designs aside, the art has changed a bit. Now, if the creator's intent is to perfectly capture the old style, then yeah, they've not quite got it at some points. But I actually think this is fine. It still looks really good. This shot of Cleopatra would never be drawn with this much detail in the original show, of course, and they depart from the whole hieroglyph silhouette in this very gory scene of Cleo wailing on herself. Oh, I'm sorry, Cleo. But I don't think it's off-putting, and by and large, this show still has a lot of what made its art so originally charming, and they've also just so happened to do a few new things. Remember, even if they weren't a feature of the show, hyper-detailed stills were very much an existing trope during the time period of Clone High's original run too. Yeah, looks, pictures, fine. What's the writing like? Is this actually entertaining? We already knew how the clones would be unfrozen from early Twitter posts from the writers, but I like the use of just hair dryers off the bat. It's very Clone High. I also like just how Clone High the explanation for Gandhi's absence is. All this came from either leaks before the whole episode leaked or posts from the creators, and it made me feel very optimistic about the new writers capturing the magic of the original show. Capturing an existing show's ambiance and humour doesn't necessarily mean you have to copy it outright, just do the same thing again but with new plot lines. And in the name of doing new things in a familiar way, the overarching theme of episode 1 is cancellation. This isn't too different from what the original series did, which is making themed episodes based on, again, tropes of the time. There's the episode about underage drinking, about mourning the loss of a friend, about prom, and so on. However, I kind of feel like making an episode about cancellation is missing the point just a bit. The reason Clone High Season 1 had themed episodes was to make fun of themed episodes. After-school specials were a much bigger thing than they are now, and that's something they were making fun of, but they're not really a thing to satirize anymore. You know what could have been a good idea? Setting the reboot a stupidly small amount of time after the first season. The clones are all thought out, oh wow, I can't believe it's been 20 whole days. That would allow you to keep using the same formula Season 1 did if you wanted to, still doing your after-school special-esque themed episodes, making fun of something that was current at the time. Only now, as the audience, this is all retro to us. Of course, you'd no longer be able to introduce new clones, but I don't think you need to in order for the show to feel fresh, though I appreciate what they've done here. If you wanted an altered cast to focus on, you could bring some of the side characters we've already seen into the main story a bit more. That being said, I'm not totally opposed to this show being set in 2023. I spent the episode watching them flirt with hyperfixating on it too much, like a lot of shows do when harping on about current year. Like Abe having a flip-flop and getting himself cancelled. That being said, the team did bring out some good jokes about cancellation and quote-unquote wokeism that were not pandering, constant, or obnoxious. See, it can be done. As far as characters go, the OG clones themselves all felt a bit off. There's Cleo's iconic voice being replaced for a more generic performance of a Valley Girl, JFK's voice being a bit less unique in its intonation as well. Joan we don't hear much of, but it's a bit odd to see the cuckoldry formula switch back to the more typical boy wants girl setup. Abe sounds different, but still very much like himself. I don't have an issue with that. However, while Cleo, for example, has a very different voice but still acts as horrified as you might expect about not being popular anymore, Abe does act quite differently. I'm thinking specifically about him digging himself a deeper hole on his flip-flop apology video. I feel like OG Abe would have spiraled, sure, but not this angrily. When the scene began, I envisioned Abe being a bit more pathetic, maybe descending into frustrated tears, or putting on theatrics as we've seen him do before in grander and grander efforts to fix his image. The general idea of Abe struggling to be diplomatic in this new political environment is solid though. There is a big identifiable reason for how different his character feels, however. Well, a small, bold, bespectacled reason. See, Gandhi was the butt of these slapstick jokes in Clone High Season 1, and there's nobody standing in for him in this one leaked episode. So Abe is being battered and mocked and making a fool of himself like Gandhi would have, while also also being a lovably hateable protagonist, like he always is. I did like where they went with how the other old clones fit into the new clones' world, all in all. I can see Cleo struggling to make herself fit in here if she can no longer just rely on her looks. JFK's thirst being praised as sex positive was funny, and actually lines up with how the fandom has treated him in recent years, long before the reboot was announced. An angsty pretty goth girl like Joan is also just textbook cool now, and Abe is as socially awkward as ever. More so now when his big weakness, emotional intelligence, or at least an attempt at it, has become so important. Oh, and I can't finish this video without sending some love to best boy Scudworth. Look at him. He's got a bit of grey in his hair now, he's found someone to share a love of murder plots with, voiced by Cleo's original voice actress Krista Miller. Oh, he's great. So, does this show look good based on the leak? Yeah. I'm still looking forward to the rest of it, as well as hearing the episode with proper sound mixing, and I think you should be too, whether you already know and love the original Clone High or not. It could go in a bad direction, and you can see indicators of some possible questionable paths they might take the show down, but the fact that they didn't fall into some of the unfunny habits so many writers do when writing a plot about it being current year, I don't think we have much to be worried about. It's just new. It doesn't feel to me like the creators have lost sight of what the first run of Clone High was all about, aesthetics-wise and writing-wise. I guess we'll just have to see. That's all for now. Take care, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and check out the rest of my channel for more animation content. Bye bye!